Missionary Ridge Local serving all points west as far as East Chattanooga, including Chickamauga Creek, Bacardi, Allen Mills, Hunt Boulevard, Whiteside, and Sherman Heights, Tennessee. Once again, final warning call for train number 100, the westbound 9:30 a.m. Missionary Ridge Local. The next departure will be at 11:30 a.m. All aboard!
To our Georgia Heritage Unit. I don't know what train this is, but what the PRLX, a fluke. Alright, first time in Heritage Unit, Central Georgia. Next up, anything. see my lucky pigeon. Alright. I'm sweating my ass here just to look at it. Pure southern steam locomotive. And another. My belly is fucking. Really? And with that. Alright. I guess I'm that lucky to just get like C2 heritage units in one day and everything. Person for the 5 nights. Alright. It's doing a thing just to turn around.
Oh, we can't go back around?
Yeah. Sorry.
Huh?
100 years old, by the way. 100 years old.
Oh,
Yeah, so what?
cool though.
Point they were going to have to do something about that tunnel, either enlarge it, which would take it out of service for an extended period, build a new tunnel, which would be extremely expensive, or do what they should have done in the first place, maybe go around the end of the ridge. That's what they did. You may have noticed the tracks up on the hillside adjacent to Grand Junction Station. Maybe you saw a freight train or two go by. That is the current Norfolk Southern Main Line that bypasses this original right-of-way. I'll continue the history of the line here shortly, but for now, we're getting ready to cross over Chickamauga Creek. And as we cross over, on the left-hand side, you can look down and see some of the earlier bridge piers. And on the right-hand side, you can see the CSX Tyner Branch Trestle and the Lightfoot Mill Road Bridge. Next, we'll pass by the McCarty storage siding. This is the only remnant of the double-track main line. We put a couple of switches in here. We have equipment in storage. Now, as we pass by, you might think some of it looks like junk, but I promise you it is not. We do tend to keep our old equipment and parts for possible use in the future. We did find out at some point we can no longer go to the local parts store and buy train parts. They just do not keep them in stock. And just at the end of McCarty storage siding, we'll be crossing over a bridge over a set of railroad tracks. Underneath us is the CSX Mainline between Atlanta and Chattanooga. It was actually the very first railroad into town in 1850. It's actually still owned by the state of Georgia. Now, maybe you've never heard of the Western Atlantic, but maybe you have heard of the Great Locomotive Chase or the Andrews Raid. Well, that took place on the Western and Atlantic Railroad, but didn't quite make it to Chattanooga. The Andrews Raid was the episode during the Civil War when James Andrews and his raiders stole Locomotive General from Big Shanty, Georgia. Their intent was to destroy the railroad supply line between Atlanta and Chattanooga by burning bridges, removing rails, and cutting telegraph wires. And they actually had a pretty good plan. It might have been successful and turned the tide of the war, except for a couple of things. Number one, it had rained for several days prior to the raid. Hard to burn anything when it's soaking wet. And number two, they didn't count on the persistence of the conductor. Well, see, back in those days, there were no dining cars on the trains, so they had pre-selected spots picked out where they would stop the train and allow people to get off to have something to eat. Well, that morning in April of 1862, the train made its morning breakfast stop in Big Shanty, Georgia, near Marietta. And most everyone got off the train. That's where the raiders went into action. They hopped aboard Locomotive General, disconnected the passenger cars, and took off towards Chattanooga. Now, I can almost picture the conductor of the train, William Fuller, inside the adjacent hotel building, the Lacey Hotel, eating breakfast, He looked out the window and saw his train leaving without him and was not happy. He chased the train on foot for several miles, later commandeered several push carts, and even later several steam locomotives. He ended up with Locomotive Texas running full speed in reverse in pursuit of the raiders. And by full speed, I mean like 20, 25 miles an hour. But because of that pursuit, not only were the raiders not able to do the destruction they had planned, they couldn't even pick up fuel or water for their locomotive. Well, they did make it through the tunnel at Tunnel Hill, around the bend past the depot in Ringgold, but shortly thereafter ran out of steam. They hopped off the locomotive and scattered into the woods. They were later caught, and most of them were hung for their crimes, and they're now buried in Chattanooga National Cemetery. They were the very first recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor. All of them, that is, except for Mr. Andrews. He was a civilian, whereas all the other participants were Northern enlisted soldiers. Now, we do have an interesting note about the Chattanooga National Cemetery, which, by the way, is only second in size as far as burials to Arlington. We have been told for anyone who currently lives in Chattanooga, they cannot be buried in that cemetery. And there is an important reason why. Because you have to be dead first. Insert your own rim shot, folks. Now, speaking of the Congressional Medal of Honor, we do have a brand new Medal of Honor Heritage Center in downtown Chattanooga. And we do recommend that new museum. It presents the story of the Andrews Raid, or the Great Locomotive Chase, in great detail. There's another first that's associated with Chattanooga besides the Congressional Medal of Honor. What's one of the first things you think of when you hear the word Chattanooga? Isn't there a song about a train?
Yep.
Of course, the Chattanooga Choo Choo. That song, made famous by Glenn Miller's orchestra in the 1940s, received the very first gold record ever presented by RCA. Folks, the engineer's blowing the whistle. We are approaching Missionary Ridge Tunnel. The tunnel took 2 years to complete between 1856 and 1858. It was dug out by hand, formally dedicated in 1859, and it is just shy of 1,000 feet long. Our latest measurement was 979 feet. As we pass through, think about the hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of trains that have passed through this tunnel in over 150 years. It was only a period of about 15 years when there were no tracks at all down through the tunnel before it was reactivated by the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum. By the way, an easy way to tell that we're in the tunnel, it'll be dark outside. The tunnel. Well, this time it was not an oncoming train. That's kind of important. This side of the ridge is called West Portal. It's where some of the fiercest fighting of the Battle of Missionary Ridge occurred during the Civil War. It was also the location of the control tower. Like I mentioned, the line had been double tracked, but was still only single track through the tunnel itself. So they had to govern movement of trains through the tunnel. Obviously, they only wanted one going through that single track at one time. That tower stayed in operation here until the switches were electrified. It can be operated automatically from the downtown rail yard. At the time, it was Southern Railroad Citico Yard, and that's basically the same location as today's Norfolk Southern's DeButch Yard. We'll be passing through one of the older neighborhoods in East Chattanooga, and at least up until recently, we had a gentleman who had lived here his entire life. He has told us stories of watching the trains pass by. This was one of the main lines into town from the north, from Knoxville and beyond. But he specifically recalled waving at the train that was carrying President Franklin Roosevelt when he was coming into town, probably for the dedication of one of the civil projects. So Needless to say, that gentleman had been around quite some time. Now, when this line was abandoned, or actually downgraded in the 1950s, it was used for a short time for a few customers that were still on the line, but it was later abandoned completely. And in 1968, the Southern Railroad donated property in East Chattanooga and the old right-of-way up to and through Missionary Ridge Tunnel to the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, and our volunteers came in and started rebuilding the tracks, laying one rail and tie at a time. By the early 1970s, they had made it through the tunnel, and by the mid-1970s, they had made it to Tunnel Boulevard. In Tunnel Boulevard, there had been an underpass there, and the city removed that underpass for clearance issues of the roadway. Therefore, there was no bridge across Tunnel Boulevard. Well, in 1977, the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum made a deal with the Southern. If we built a new bridge over the roadway there, the Southern would give us the second portion of the original preserved line. And that's how we ended up with the 3-mile railroad for today's 6-mile round trip. Now, folks, we will be pulling into East Chattanooga in just a moment. We ask you stay seated until we call for your car color to unload. And we do ask that while we're on the ground in East Chattanooga, everyone does their best to social distance. Try to keep at least 6 feet between yourself and any other party around. And as we exit from the train, we'll follow the yellow dots on the ground to the turntable where we're going to watch the locomotive rotate. Now, when you return to the train, we will be reloading again by car colors. We ask that you return to the same car you're sitting in now, as well as the same seat. And you will find seat numbers above the windows or on the luggage racks. So just make a note of those seat numbers, and if you will please return to that same section when you return to the train. We thank you very much. This is East Chattanooga. Please wait until your car is called to unload. It's nice while it lasted. It just didn't last long enough.
Take another one. It ain't gonna hurt. All right, there, sir. I appreciate it, Johnny. I wonder why they disconnect.
The old locomotive. Wow.
Well, good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. We do want to welcome all of you to the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum's East Chattanooga Terminal. Again, we're glad to have you with us today. Now, we've just ridden over one of the oldest railroad lines in this area, completed in 1858 as the East Tennessee, Virginia, and Georgia line. We passed over 4 bridges, went through pre-Civil War Missionary Ridge Tunnel, and here we are in East Chattanooga, and at this time, it's the end of the line. So what we're going to do is rotate our locomotive around on our turntable. Now, turntables were very important during the days of steam locomotives. Steam engines are designed to operate forward primarily. Now, they can back up, but it's kind of inefficient. It's hard for the engineer to see where they're going, have to turn around backwards, and their view is blocked by the coal tender. By the way, did all of you know that steam locomotives have tender behinds? You do now. Now, when the diesel engines came along, diesel locomotives, most of them are designed to operate forward or reverse just about as easily. So therefore, they did not need to be turned around like steam locomotives. So when the diesels came along, most of the turntables around the country, they were removed, they were lost, and they were scrapped out, lost to history. So we're lucky to have our turntable. Now this one is only an 80 feet table. From one end to the other, 80 feet. Now that's fairly small. But this table was built in 1916, originally installed in Macon, Georgia, was later moved to Cedartown, Georgia, and the reason for that was the locomotives were getting larger in Macon, being a big city. So they actually needed a larger turntable in Macon, so they installed a 100 or 110-foot table and took out the 80-foot table. Sent it to Cedartown on a branch line where they had smaller locomotives, so that worked out well for them. And this table stayed in use there in Cedartown until it was purchased by the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, moved here to East Chattanooga, is restored and installed, first used on July 4th, 1982. Now this table is a center balanced turntable. That means underneath the middle here, there's a big 6-foot bearing. Now you can't see it, but when the engine pulls on, the weight will primarily be here in the middle. So we're going to try to balance here, and then we'll do our rotation. I tell people it's kind of like a seesaw or a teeter-totter. If you put 2 kids on a seesaw that are the same weight, it's going to balance in the middle, right? Same concept here. Now, like I said, this is a fairly short turntable, 80 feet long. It is almost too short for the 4501, and you'll see why here in just a moment. Now, when we start our rotation, we do ask that all of you stay behind the yellow line there on your ground for your safety. Now, part of 4501 will actually be hanging over the coupler knuckles, and when it comes turning around, it will be fairly close to those handrail stanchions. We'll pull onto the turntable here from track number 1. When we do our 180-degree rotation, we'll pull off onto the adjacent track, onto track number 2. That will allow the engineer to drive down past our train, go through a switch, and then reconnect onto the other end of our train. So what had been the last car will now be the first on the return trip. So we're rolling onto the turntable here. The driving wheels are going on now. You can see how they all roll at the same speed, attached with the drive rods. Now the tender wheels are starting to go on. When we stop here, there'll only be about 1.5 feet or so on either end between the wheel and the end of the rail. We're on turntable ready to spin. Again, please stay back. This turntable was man-powered originally. It had leverage bars on the side. It had to be pushed around. We call it Armstrong style. But we did add a 25 power electric motor, and that's how we rotate it now. 25 horsepower to turn about 175 tons. Now our locomotive, number 4501, or like I say, world famous engine number 4501. This locomotive was built in 1911 for the Southern Railroad, the very first Mikado used by the railroad. Now, Mikado refers to the wheel arrangement, a 2-8-2 wheel arrangement, 2 lead wheels, 8 driving wheels, and 2 trailing wheels. This was a popular model for the Southern. 4501 was a success. Southern bought nearly 200 additional units. So out of those 200 locomotives, 4501 was the first. It's also the last one. Thankfully, it was not scrapped in the 1940s. When diesel engines came along, it was saved and purchased out of a deadline by the Kentucky and Tennessee Railroad in Stearns, Kentucky. They needed a larger locomotive, so they brought the 4501 to Stearns, renumbered it K&T number 12, and it operated for them between 1948 and 1964. Now, 1964 was pretty late as far as the railroad using steam locomotives, but the K&T had their own fuel source. They had their own coal mine, so it worked out well for them. They used the engine all the way to 1964, at which time they were purchasing second-hand diesel electrics to replace the steam engine. 4501 became surplus. It was purchased by the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum's first president, Paul Merriman, for $5,000. And somehow he talked the Southern into running it down to Chattanooga 56 years ago this month, on June 6, 1964. It became kind of the trademark of the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum. We restored it to operation in 1966 and leased it back to the Southern Railroad, where it operated sporadic excursion trips on the Southern between 1966 and 1994. We used it here at TVRM for another few years till 1998, at which time we thought it would be retired forever. Well, Norfolk Southern came along in 2011, announcing their 21st Century Steam program. They wanted 4501 to be part of that. So that's the reason that we get to see 4501 run today.
Right hands, they just fit in.
Now, the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum was founded in 1961 by a small group of local residents who were concerned about the disappearance of steam locomotives and passenger trains. They decided they would try to save a little bit of our railroad history. So we're getting ready to celebrate our 60th anniversary next year. And we've been successful with the help of people like you. Your ticket purchase today is helping us to keep this history alive, and we do appreciate it very much. Also, we're going to head back over and reboard our train for the return trip. We'll lower the right, yeah, I forgot you did that. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
I have a little more time now. And if there's, I thought about taking this one of them small ones.
Okay.
We have to do a train museum road trip. Things clear up.
Yeah, well, you're closer than some of the people that drive up here.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll chat later.
All right, good to see you. Take care.
So, nothing.
Oh. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed your visit to East Chattanooga. East Chattanooga is the location of our maintenance complex. You might have seen the building there with the Tennessee Valley Railroad sign on top. It's our East Chattanooga shop, also named Sewell Shops, in memory of our co-founder and longtime president, Robert M. Sewell. Very proud of our shop complex. It's one of the best of its kind in the country. And matter of fact, it's the only place in North America where under one roof you will find the 3 essential separate machines for properly maintaining steam locomotive driving wheels. We have a 90-inch wheel lathe, a quartering machine, and a journal lathe.
Oh yeah.
And because of having these special machines, not only do we maintain our own wheels, such as those on number 4501, but we do contract work for other locomotive operators around the country and even in Canada. Now those machines were built in the 1940s, but they were restored to operation by a group of volunteers in 1997, and since that time, we probably worked on wheels from at least 3 dozen different steam locomotives, including recently wheels from a locomotive that was being restored to operation in Florida, one in Alaska, and one in Maryland. I also wanted to mention that the depots that you've seen today, now neither one are original to the railroad line. They were built by and for the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum for our use. The smaller station in East Chattanooga we just departed from is typical of a small city station. You might have seen around the turn of the century, wooden construction with the covered platform, and that building completed in 1980. The larger of the 2 stations were originally boarded at Grand Junction is a fairly accurate reproduction of the depot, which still stands in Tuscumbia, Alabama. It's a good size for us to copy. The depot in Tuscumbia had the station area on the first level, the corporate offices for the railroad on the second level, and our Grand Junction station has the ticket office, waiting room, gift shop, and the Depot Deli restaurant on the first level. And the second level, which is currently off limits, has an additional kitchen, more storage, and a multi-purpose room used for exhibits and or showing videos to school groups on field trips. That building completed in 1985. We just heard the engineer blowing the whistle. We're approaching Missionary Ridge Tunnel once again.
I'll use other tractor trains that the TVRM do.
Now, even though this might be your first ride with us here at the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, you may have seen us in the movies or on television. We do a fair amount of film production work. We try to take advantage of those opportunities as we can. But we've been involved with filming of major motion pictures. The most recent was the movie 42, about the life of baseball star Jackie Robinson. Before that, we filmed for Water for Elephants with Christoph Waltz and Robert Pattinson. George Clooney spent a day with us a number of years ago when he was filming his movie about professional football in its infancy called Leatherheads. Larry the Cable Guy was here once filming for the History Channel, and I like to tell people at least that one day we got her done. Now, we've done some filming for music videos, usually country music, since we're located as close as we are to Nashville. Country star Eric Church filmed the video for his song Creepin' entirely here at the Tennessee Valley Railroad. But many famous people have ridden our trains through the years: Johnny Cash, Chris Christopherson, and even Jimmy Stewart. Creek for the final time.
Chickamauga Creek.
Keep your eyes peeled for sharks and alligators as we cross, because if you see any, well, they've surely got loose in the Tennessee Aquarium. All we usually see are turtles and fish.
Oh, how
Turtles like to get up on top of the logs and sun their shells. Once again, we'd like to thank you for riding today on the Missionary Ridge Local train, and we'd like to invite you to come back. Now, typically, we do have many other services throughout the year, different types of special train rides, events, activities, but as you already know, this is not a typical year. However, we do hope that some of these services will be added back on the calendar in the near future. Things such as our trips into Northwest Georgia, called the Hiwassee River Rail Adventure and Somerville Steam Specials, also dinner trains, as well as our satellite service out of Etowah, Tennessee, called the Hiwassee River Rail Adventure Trips. Now, one thing that we do have on the books right now is our annual Day Out with Thomas. It was delayed from May until August and has actually been moved one more time to the last couple weekends in September, so be sure to check into that. Now, when we arrive in East Chattanooga, again, we do ask, Grand Junction, we do ask that you wait until we call your car color to unload. And once you unload, you go down the ramp to the left and you can walk clockwise around the building. If you'd like to go back into Grand Junction Station, please do so from the front door of the building. And you can go inside for restrooms, also our gift shop and our restaurant area. And by the way, a couple of things to bring to your attention. We do have an excellent documentary about Locomotive 4501 called And Then There Was One, and that is available in DVD form for $14.95. And also check into our specialty ice creams. We have 2 flavors of ice cream you can only purchase here at the Tennessee Valley Railroad, made locally by Clumpies. We have Smoke and Cinders and Rocky Railroad. Interesting flavors of ice cream. Folks, we thank you for riding with us today. Hope you enjoyed your visit, and we'll come back and ride again. Thank you so much.
Damn.